Welcome back. This channel exists because of your support. Subscribe, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now let's get into the story. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked through the door that Wednesday evening. Whitney had cooked dinner. Not just any dinner, but my favorite, pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes. The dining table was set with our good plates, the ones we usually save for when her parents visited. Candles flickered on the table, casting soft shadows across her face. "This looks amazing," I said, setting my laptop bag down by the door. "What's the occasion?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can't I do something nice for my husband without needing a reason?" I'd been married to Whitney Campbell for 6 years. I knew when she was nervous about something. The elaborate dinner, the careful table setting, the way she kept adjusting her napkin throughout the meal. All signs pointed to a conversation I probably didn't want to have. We made small talk while we ate. She asked about my day at the consulting firm. I asked about hers. She'd been between jobs for about 8 months now, ever since leaving her marketing coordinator position at a startup. She'd called it a cultural fit issue. I'd never pressed for details. After dinner, as I started to clear the plates, Whitney touched my arm. "Leave them. I need to talk to you about something important." My stomach dropped slightly, but I sat back down. "Okay, what's up?" She pulled out a leather-bound journal I'd never seen before, a pen, and an iPad, setting them on the table between us with a kind of ceremonial care. "I've been doing a lot of deep work on myself lately," she began. "Really examining my life, my relationships, my needs." "That's good," I said cautiously. "Self-reflection is healthy." "I've gained a lot of clarity," she continued, opening the journal to a page dense with handwritten notes, particularly about what I need from our partnership moving forward. Partnership. The word felt clinical somehow, like we were discussing a business arrangement rather than a marriage. "What do you mean, what you need?" Whitney sat up straighter, her posture shifting into something more formal. "I'm talking about restructuring our relational framework. I've been working with a relationship coach online, Adriana Blake. She's really helped me understand how I've been undervaluing myself." I blinked. "Undervaluing yourself? In our marriage?" "In our partnership, yes." She tapped her pen against the journal. "I've come to realize that there are significant imbalances in how we've structured things. Imbalances that need to be addressed." A cold feeling was spreading through my chest. "Whitney, what exactly are we talking about here?" She smiled, and this time it looked almost excited. "I'm going to need a few days to prepare a comprehensive presentation. I want to make sure I communicate everything clearly. How does Saturday afternoon work for you? Around 2? A presentation? About our marriage?" "Our partnership framework, yes." She was already making notes in her journal. "I know it might seem unusual, but Adriana teaches that clarity and structure are essential for healthy relationships. No more vague discussions or unspoken expectations. Everything transparent and documented." I sat there, trying to process what I was hearing. My wife was scheduling a formal presentation about our marriage. "Sure," I heard myself say. "Saturday at 2. Perfect." Whitney closed her journal with a satisfied snap. "I really appreciate you being open to this process, Dean. Most men would react defensively. This is exactly the kind of respect I deserve." She kissed my cheek and headed upstairs, leaving me alone with the dirty dishes and a growing sense of dread. The next 2 days were strange. Whitney spent hours in our home office with the door closed. I could hear her typing furiously, the printer running at odd hours. Thursday evening, I passed by and heard her on a video call, using words like value alignment and relational equity and needs assessment. Friday during my lunch break, I called my older brother Jeremy. He lived across town in Wicker Park and had always been my sounding board for major decisions. "She scheduled a presentation?" Jeremy repeated, his voice incredulous. "Like a PowerPoint presentation?" "I don't know the format yet. But yeah, apparently she spent days preparing materials." Jeremy laughed. "Dude, is she going to try to get you to agree to some chore chart or something? Maybe she wants to plan a vacation?" "I don't think so." She kept talking about restructuring our partnership framework. It sounded more serious than that. The laughter faded from Jeremy's voice. "That doesn't sound like the Whitney I know. She's always been pretty laid back." "I thought so too. But these past few months, she's been different. More critical. More demanding. I figured it was just stress from not working." "Just don't agree to anything on the spot," Jeremy advised. Whatever she wants. Tell her you need time to think about it. Yeah, good call. Friday evening, Whitney was in exceptional spirits. She'd had something delivered with overnight shipping. I saw her unpacking presentation materials, a folding display board, printed binders, colored tabs. She noticed me watching from the doorway. Tomorrow's going to be really productive, she said brightly. I think you're going to be impressed with how thoroughly I've thought this through. I forced a smile, looking forward to it. That night, lying in bed while Whitney slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what the hell I'd gotten myself into. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm October weather. I spent the morning doing yard work, trying not to think about the afternoon ahead. At 1:30, Whitney called me inside. You'll want to shower and change, she said. This is an important discussion. I showered and put on jeans and a button-down shirt, unsure what the dress code was for your wife presenting you with demands about your marriage. When I came downstairs at 2, I stopped in the doorway of our dining room. Whitney had transformed it into a conference room. Our dining table, usually cluttered with mail and her various craft projects, was cleared completely. At one end sat a professional-looking presentation board with multiple pages clipped to it. A thick binder sat on the table in front of the chair, clearly meant for me. Whitney stood at the other end, wearing a navy blazer over a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked like she was about to pitch investors. Thank you for making time for this important discussion, she began, gesturing for me to sit. Her voice had taken on a formal quality I'd never heard before. I've prepared a comprehensive analysis of our current arrangement and identified key areas that require immediate adjustment. I sat down slowly, pulling the binder toward me. The cover page read, Relationship Optimization Proposal, Campbell Partnership Review. Below that, in smaller text, prepared by Whitney Sullivan Campbell. Before we begin, Whitney continued, I want to acknowledge the effort you've put into our relationship. I'm grateful for that foundation. What we're doing today is building on that foundation to create something even stronger. She sounded like a corporate trainer. I opened the binder. Let's start with emotional labor distribution, Whitney announced, tapping a pie chart on her display board. Currently, I handle approximately 90% of the invisible work that maintains our relationship. Social calendar management, gift purchasing for both our families, remembering important dates, managing household administration. I pay all the bills, I pointed out. You process transactions, she corrected. I manage the overall household operations. There's a significant difference. Going forward, you'll need to take ownership of all these tasks. Additionally, I'm requiring written weekly appreciation for my emotional contributions. I stared at her. You want me to write you thank you notes? Appreciation statements. It's a standard practice in evolved partnerships. She flipped to the next page on her board. This brings us to financial recognition. My hands tightened on the binder. Despite my current employment transition, Whitney continued, I bring substantial value to this household. I'm requesting that financial decision-making authority for purchases over $500 be transferred to me. Additionally, I need a dedicated monthly personal enrichment budget of $800, deposited into a separate account I'll control. $800 a month. I said carefully. For personal enrichment? My domestic contributions have quantifiable economic value, she replied, as if this were obvious. If you hired someone to do what I do, it would cost significantly more. Except she wasn't doing much of anything lately. I bit back that comment and gestured for her to continue. Personal development time, Whitney said, highlighting a section in her document. This is crucial for maintaining my individual identity within our union. I require 3 full evenings per week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as non-negotiable personal time. You'll need to be out of the house or in a separate room with no interruptions. Additionally, I need every other Saturday as a solo day. I did the math in my head. That was more than half the week where I'd be exiled from my own home so she could have me time. Social obligation restructuring, she continued, apparently not noticing my expression. Your selective approach to social events reflects poorly on our relationship status. You'll need to attend all events with my friends. Book club at Nicole's every month, the weekly coffee meetups, quarterly couples dinners. Minimum 2-hour attendance, active participation, no early exits. I'd always been selective about social events. I liked Whitney's friends fine in small doses, But her book club discussions usually devolved into wine-fueled gossip sessions that I found exhausting. Apparently, my preferences no longer mattered. Intimacy framework, Whitney said, and something in her clinical tone made my stomach turn. Physical intimacy will occur only when I initiate or explicitly consent. You may not express desire or create pressure through suggestion. I'll be tracking our intimate interactions using an app, and we'll review the metrics quarterly. She was going to track our sex life on an app and review it quarterly like a performance evaluation. Communication protocol, she went on. To prevent unnecessary emotional burden, you'll need to request permission before sharing concerns about our relationship. I'll designate feedback windows when I'm receptive to critique. Outside those windows, please journal your thoughts privately. So I could only criticize her when she decided she was ready to hear it. Finally, decision-making hierarchy. Whitney flipped to the last page of her display. When we disagree, the person who feels more strongly about the issue should prevail. I'll determine the intensity of my feelings, and you'll need to respect that assessment. This applies to home decisions, social plans, financial choices, lifestyle matters. Equal partnership doesn't mean identical input on every decision. She closed her binder and looked at me expectantly, clearly proud of herself. These are my non-negotiable terms for continuing this partnership, Whitney declared. I've researched what healthy marriages look like in today's world, and these represent industry standards for progressive relationships. Industry standards for marriage. I sat there, reading through the binder more carefully, my disbelief growing with each page. Every single guideline increased my obligations while reducing hers. Every single one gave her more control while stripping away my autonomy. What happens if I don't agree to these terms? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Her confident smile faltered slightly. Well, then I'd have to seriously reconsider whether this relationship is meeting my needs. I'm not interested in staying in an arrangement that doesn't value my contributions appropriately. There it was. The ultimatum, delivered with corporate politeness. Accept her demands or lose her. I see you're processing this information, Whitney said, misreading my silence. I know it's a lot to absorb, but I'm confident you'll recognize the value proposition here. I'm essentially offering you the opportunity to be married to an upgraded version of me. An upgraded version. Like she was software getting a new release. These terms ensure I can be my best self in our relationship, she continued. When I'm fulfilled and properly supported, everyone benefits. Think of it as an investment in our future. She actually believed her own presentation. She'd convinced herself that accepting her demands would somehow improve our marriage. I need some time to review this, I said, standing up from the table. Of course. Whitney beamed at me. Take all the time you need. I know change can be overwhelming, but I'm excited about where we're headed once we implement these improvements. I walked out of that dining room and went straight to our bedroom, closing the door behind me. I sat on the edge of our bed, her binder in my hands, and tried to understand what had just happened. My wife had just presented me with 7 non-negotiable demands and told me to accept them or lose her. She'd done it with printed materials and professional formatting and the confidence of someone who genuinely believed she was being generous. I opened my laptop and started researching divorce attorneys in Chicago. The next 5 days were a performance. Whitney would check in periodically, asking if I had any questions about her terms or needed clarification on any points. Each time, I'd tell her I was still reviewing, still thinking. Her confidence grew with every conversation. I'm really proud of how mature you're being about this, she told me Wednesday morning, patting my shoulder like I was a good employee accepting a demotion gracefully. Most men would react emotionally instead of logically analyzing the benefits. What she didn't know was that I was conducting my own analysis. Sunday, I'd reread her binder 3 times, taking notes on every demand. I'd looked up Adriana Blake online and found a relationship coach selling $2,000 courses on feminine reclamation and optimizing your partnership value. The testimonials were full of women talking about how they'd leveled up their relationships by setting boundaries and demanding better terms. Monday during lunch, I called an attorney named Richard Kowalski. Jeremy had recommended him. Tuesday, I'd sat in Kowalski's office in the loop while he reviewed our financial situation. I've seen this before, Kowalski had said, leaning back in his chair. Online coaching programs convincing people they're entitled to more without considering what they're offering in return. How long has she been unemployed? 8 months. And she wants $800 a month for personal enrichment while you cover all the bills. That's what she's requesting, yes. Kowalski had shaken his head. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, not community property. Given the circumstances, you'd likely come out of this in decent shape. No kids, limited shared assets. You've been married 6 years, so no long-term alimony concerns. I'd spent Wednesday organizing our financial documents, making copies of everything important. I'd opened a separate bank account and transferred a portion of our savings, enough to cover my expenses during a separation. I'd documented Whitney's employment history, her spending patterns since she'd quit her job, the actual division of household labor. Thursday, I'd created a detailed cost-benefit analysis. What would my life look like if I stayed under Whitney's terms versus if I left? The numbers were startling. Between the personal enrichment budget, the reduced household contribution on her part, and the increased emotional labor on mine, staying married under her proposal would cost me approximately 60% more in stress and money than just being single. And I'd be happier single. Friday, I'd made my decision. I spent the evening at FedEx office on Clark Street, printing materials for my own presentation. When I came home, Whitney had asked if I was done with my review. I'm taking this seriously, like you asked, I told her. I need until Saturday. I appreciate your thoroughness, Whitney had said, genuinely pleased. This is exactly the kind of respect I deserve. She had no idea what was coming. Saturday morning, Whitney went out for coffee with Nicole. I used the time to set up the living room. I borrowed her presentation easel, set up my laptop, printed and bound my own documents. When she came home around 1, she saw the setup and actually clapped her hands together. "Look at you being so professional about this," she exclaimed. "I love that we're handling this like adults." "Please have a seat," I said, gesturing to the couch across from my chair. "I've completed my analysis of your proposal and prepared a comprehensive response." Whitney settled onto the couch eagerly, pulling out her journal to take notes on whatever minor adjustments I might suggest to her perfect plan. "First, I want to thank you for your detailed presentation," I began. "It really helped clarify some things for me about our relationship and where we stand." She nodded approvingly. "After careful consideration of your terms and conducting my own market research, I've identified several areas of concern." I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward her. "Let's start with a basic cost-benefit analysis." The spreadsheet I'd created was detailed. Current state versus proposed state, broken down by category. Financial contribution, household tasks, emotional labor, decision-making authority, personal autonomy. Your proposal essentially reduces your contributions to our household while significantly increasing mine, I explained, pointing to the numbers. Currently, I cover 100% of our financial obligations. You contribute 0. Under your proposal, I'd still cover 100%, but you'd have primary authority over major purchases plus an additional $800 monthly for personal use. Whitney leaned forward, studying the screen. "You're not accounting for the value of my domestic contributions." I did account for them. I pulled up another sheet. I assigned economic value to every task you mentioned. Household management, social coordination, emotional labor. Even being generous with the estimates, the math doesn't work in your favor. You're currently contributing approximately 40% of household tasks, while I cover 60. Under your terms, that shifts to you doing 15% and me doing 85. Strategic planning is more valuable than task execution, Whitney protested. "Maybe in a corporation," I replied. "But we're not a corporation. We're supposed to be partners." I switched to the next slide. I also did market research, like you suggested. This spreadsheet showed the cost of my life as a single man versus the cost of staying married under Whitney's terms. I'd calculated rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Andersonville, adjusted food costs, utilities, entertainment, everything. From a pure value perspective, your proposal offers negative return on investment. I'd spend less money, have more personal freedom, and eliminate the emotional management requirements you're requesting. Solo life is actually the better financial decision. The color was starting to drain from Whitney's face. Which brings me to my counterproposal. I slid my binder across the coffee table. She opened it, and I watched her expression shift from confusion to shock to something close to panic. The cover page read, "Dissolution Agreement, Campbell Marriage, Termination Recommendation." "What is this?" Whitney whispered. My response to your renegotiation request. I kept my voice calm and professional, mirroring the tone she'd used a week ago. You approached this as a business decision. I evaluated it using business criteria. This is divorce papers, she said, her voice rising. You're filing for divorce? I'm choosing to terminate our partnership, I corrected, using her language. Based on the analysis I just showed you, continuing under your proposed terms doesn't make financial or emotional sense. I'm recommending we dissolve the marriage instead. You can't be serious. Whitney stood up, the binder falling from her hands. This is insane. You presented 7 non-negotiable demands and an ultimatum. You told me to accept your terms or you'd reconsider the relationship. I'm choosing option 3, end it on my terms instead. I wasn't threatening divorce. You gave me an ultimatum, I said evenly. Accept your demands or lose you. That's literally the definition of a threat. Whitney tried a different approach, her voice softening. Dean, this isn't what I meant. I just wanted us to communicate better, to work together on improving things. You didn't want to work together. You wanted me to comply. There's a difference. So one disagreement, and you want to end our marriage? This isn't a disagreement, Whitney. You fundamentally changed how you view our relationship. You spent weeks researching how to extract more value from me while contributing less. You made charts and presentations. You gave me terms and conditions. I stood up, gathering my materials. You showed me that you see me as a resource to optimize, not a partner to respect. I love you, she said desperately. Your proposal suggested otherwise. Love doesn't come with terms and conditions. Love doesn't require renegotiation. Love doesn't treat the other person like an employee who needs to prove their worth. I picked up the overnight bag I'd packed that morning, hidden in the coat closet. Whitney's eyes widened when she saw it. You already decided, she said, her voice breaking. Before you even came down here, you'd already decided to leave. You decided when you gave me that ultimatum, I replied. I'm just following through on your terms. If I didn't meet your needs, you were going to leave. Well, you don't meet mine anymore. So I'm leaving first. Dean, please. We can talk about this. I can change the proposal. The problem isn't the specific demands. It's that you thought making them was acceptable. I headed for the door. My attorney will contact you Monday. The papers in that binder outline a fair division of assets. You should get your own lawyer to review them. Where are you going? Jeremy's. I'll be staying there for now. As I walked out, I could hear Whitney crying behind me. Part of me felt terrible, but a larger part felt relief. She'd wanted to play hardball business negotiations with our marriage. She'd just learned that I was better at business than she was. The next week was a masterclass in watching someone realize they'd miscalculated badly. Sunday, my phone exploded with calls and texts from Whitney. I didn't answer. She needed to understand that this wasn't a negotiating tactic. I was done. Monday, she showed up at my office building in the Loop. Security wouldn't let her up without my permission, which I didn't give. But she waited in the lobby until I agreed to meet her in a coffee shop across the street. We sat in a booth near the back. Whitney looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, her hair uncombed. I talked to Adriana, she said, wrapping her hands around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking. She said this is a common fear response from men who feel threatened by empowered women. I'm not threatened by empowerment, I said quietly. I'm done with entitlement. What if I modify the proposal? We can negotiate the terms, find something that works for both of us. The problem isn't the specific terms, Whitney. It's that you thought presenting them was acceptable in the first place. You didn't come to me as your husband and say, hey, I'm feeling unappreciated. Can we talk about some changes? You scheduled a formal presentation with non-negotiable demands and an ultimatum. I was trying to be clear, to avoid miscommunication. You were trying to control me. There's a difference. She reached across the table for my hands, but I pulled back. Please, I know I messed up, but marriages are supposed to survive mistakes. They're supposed to have forgiveness and second chances. Marriage is supposed to be about mutual respect, I said. You showed me that you don't respect me enough to discuss changes like an equal partner. You try to dictate terms like I was your employee. I can't unknow that about you. Tuesday brought a call from Nicole. I answered, curious what Whitney's best friend had to say. She's devastated, Nicole said without preamble. She didn't mean for it to go this way. What did she mean to happen? There was a long pause. She thought you'd agree to some of it. Compromise. So she's upset I didn't comply, not that she made demands in the first place. Nicole had no response to that. Wednesday, Whitney's mother called. I answered out of politeness. Mrs. Sullivan had always been kind to me. Whitney says you're divorcing over a misunderstanding about household chores, she said, her voice tight with concern. Did she tell you what actually happened? She said you two had different ideas about dividing responsibilities. I had to admire the revisionist history. Reducing her 7-demand ultimatum to a simple disagreement about chores was impressive spin. She presented me with a list of non-negotiable terms and told me to accept them or she'd reconsider our marriage, I explained. I chose option 3, ended on my terms instead. But she's willing to forget all that now, Mrs. Sullivan pressed. Can't you just move past this? I could, I said, but I won't. She showed me exactly how she views our relationship when she thought she had leverage over me. I don't want to be married to someone who sees me as a resource to be managed rather than a partner to be respected. You're being stubborn. I'm being smart. If I cave now, she'll just come back with new demands later. That's how people like this operate. The following Thursday evening, I needed to go back to the house to get more of my belongings. Whitney was supposed to be out, but when I arrived, she was there waiting. She'd cleaned the entire house, made dinner, lit candles. I was wrong, she said the moment I walked in. Completely wrong. Can we please just forget this happened and start over? You spent weeks planning how to get more from me while giving less, I said, standing in the doorway, not coming further inside. That's not something you do on impulse. That's who you are now. That's not who I am. I got confused by all that online stuff. The coaching program, the groups. I see that now. It was all garbage. You saw it when I didn't comply. If I'd agreed, you'd be congratulating yourself on your successful negotiation. I'll quit those groups, Whitney pleaded. Delete all the apps. Go back to how things were. You can't. I can't unsee you the way I see you now. She broke down completely then, sliding down to sit on the floor, crying. What about our 6 years together? Don't they mean anything? I crouched down so we were eye level, but I didn't touch her. They meant everything. That's why this hurts. But the person I spent 6 years with wouldn't have done this. You showed me that when you thought you had leverage, you'd use it against me. I can't unknow that. So that's it. You won't even try? You already made the choice when you gave me that ultimatum. I'm just following through on your terms. I gathered what I came for and left her there on the floor. A month after I'd moved out, we sat in Kowalski's office for mediation. Whitney had gotten her own attorney, a woman named Patricia Brown who looked almost sympathetic toward her client's position. My client is willing to attend couples counseling, Brown offered. She recognizes that her approach was problematic and wants to work on the relationship. Kowalski looked at me. I shook my head. My client is willing to proceed with filing, Kowalski said. Whitney had agreed to everything in my proposed division of assets. We had no children, limited shared property. The house was in both our names, but I'd been making the payments, so I'd offered to buy out her half at current market value. She'd accepted. We'd split our savings accounts evenly. It was relatively clean, as divorces go. The papers were signed. 60 days until it was final. In the parking lot afterward, Whitney tried one more time. I hope you find whatever it is you think you're looking for. There was bitterness in her voice, but also resignation. I already found it, I said. Self-respect. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I was doing my grocery shopping at the Whole Foods on Ashland Avenue on a Saturday morning when I ran into Nicole. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, but she approached anyway. Hey Dean, how are you? Good, I said honestly. Really good, actually. You? I'm okay. I actually wanted to apologize. I had no idea what Whitney was really asking for until after everything happened. When she told me about it beforehand, she made it sound so reasonable. Like she just wanted you to be more involved in planning things. I appreciate that, I said. How is she? Nicole hesitated. She's struggling. Still doing that coaching program. She's in some module now about healing from masculine resistance or something. So she's learned nothing. Apparently not. She's dating someone new. Already talking about implementing her framework with him. I shook my head. I hope he's smarter than I was. You look good, Nicole said. Happy. I am happy. Finally. We parted ways and I finished my shopping, thinking about how different my life was now. I had a 1-bedroom apartment in Andersonville that was all mine. I'd gotten back into rock climbing, something I'd given up when Whitney complained it took too much time away from weekend activities with her friends. I was sleeping better, eating better, generally feeling more like myself. That evening, I had dinner plans with Melissa Torres, a physical therapist I'd met through Jeremy's girlfriend about a month after the divorce was finalized. We'd taken things slowly, both of us gun-shy from previous relationships. But there was an ease to being with her that I'd never had with Whitney. I picked her up from her place in Logan Square, and we drove to a Thai restaurant she'd been wanting to try. Over pad Thai and green curry, we talked about our weeks. She'd had a difficult patient, an older man recovering from hip surgery, who kept pushing too hard and re-injuring himself. I finally had to sit him down and explain that healing requires patience, Melissa said. He can't rush it just because he's frustrated with the timeline. Did he listen? I think so. We'll see on Monday. She smiled. How was your week? I told her about a project at work that was going sideways, a client who kept changing requirements. She listened, asked thoughtful questions, offered perspective from her own experience with difficult people. After dinner, we went back to my apartment. Melissa looked around at the changes I'd made since she'd last been there. I'd finally hung some artwork, bought actual furniture instead of the bare minimum. It's looking good in here, she said. Starting to feel like home? Getting there. I pulled her close on the couch. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever think about what you're getting from this relationship versus what you're giving? Melissa considered the question seriously. I think about whether I'm happy and whether you're happy. If we're both happy, then the give and take kind of balances itself out naturally. Why? Just thinking about my ex. She was so focused on optimizing her return on investment that she forgot relationships aren't transactions. They're definitely not. Melissa kissed me softly. The best relationships are the ones where both people are trying to give more than they take, not keeping score. We settled in to watch a movie, and I marveled at how simple it could be. No presentations, no demands, no ultimatums. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company, trying to build something together. Later that night, after Melissa had fallen asleep, I lay awake thinking about the path that had led me here. Whitney had been so confident when she'd presented her demands. She'd assumed I needed her more than I needed my dignity. She'd calculated wrong. The biggest mistake people make in relationships is treating their partners like vendors in a business deal. When you demand someone prove their worth to you, you reveal how little you actually value them. Real partnership isn't about optimization. It's about mutual investment, genuine care, building something together instead of extracting maximum value with minimum effort. Whitney was still out there somewhere, probably working through Adriana Blake's expensive modules, still convinced that the right framework and the right terms would get her the relationship she wanted. She'd learn eventually, or she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd chosen to walk away from someone who saw me as a resource to manage. I'd chosen to find someone who saw me as a person to cherish. Some people spend their whole lives negotiating for happiness instead of just building it with someone who wants the same things. I chose to build instead of bargain. Best decision I ever made. You can't renegotiate respect. You can't negotiate your way into genuine love and partnership. You either have those things naturally, through mutual care and effort, or you don't have them at all. And if you don't have them, no amount of presentations or frameworks or coaching programs will create them. Whitney had tried to treat our marriage like a contract with terms that could be rewritten. She'd learned the hard way that when you give someone an ultimatum, you'd better be prepared for them to choose the option you didn't expect. She'd gambled our entire relationship on the assumption that I valued her presence more than my self-respect. She'd bet wrong, and I'd never been happier to lose a bet I didn't make. Dear listeners, that's our ending. If it resonated, subscribe to support the channel. See you next time.